Well, ladies and gentlemen, so today we are going to be doing our video on Parivartan Yoga. And what happens with Parivartan Yoga in your horoscope. And I am making this video because most of the people don't get the simplicity of this yoga, this Parivartan Yoga. And especially like in my consultation when I'm talking about, well, you can have a relationship in this time period because there's this Parivartan Yoga happening, and then you email me, you're like, this Parivartan Yoga has nothing to do with relationship. Why is this happening? And then I'm like, no, this is why it's happening. And I think, don't quote me, but I think in the very end of my book, in the final chart on aspects of the speed of light, I talk about these weird scenarios. So that's what we're going to talk about, like some of the missing links in the Parivartan Yoga. Parivartan Yoga simply means two planets exchanging each other's signs. They're not looking at each other. That is also in a way a Parivartan Yoga, exchange of energy. Like if I'm Mars and Saturn is looking at me, our energies are being exchanged. It's a Parivartan Yoga. But the actual Parivartan Yoga is when Mars is in the sign of Aquarius and Saturn is in the sign of Aries or Scorpio. So because they're in each other's signs, it's like they both have this walkie-talkie, where they can quickly talk to each other. They're in each other's houses and suddenly they find this telepathic link with each other. That's a Parivartan Yoga. And whichever house this is occurring in, the signs that are occurring in certain time periods, you will see things happening to those houses. But then there's these other things that happen. So obviously, if you do not know what kind of Parivartan Yoga you're having, like which sign, which planet is in whose sign. So if two planets are exchanging each other's signs, that's a Parivartan Yoga. To find that out, for that, check out the links here. Check out my full astrological report, where especially on the second page at the bottom, you'll see which sign each planet is placed in. So you'll know if you know basics of astrology, and also my book, Astrology Conjunction, and at the aspects of the speed of light here, including all my consultations and reports. So, Parivartan Yoga is not only occurs or gets affected when two planets are exchanging each other's signs. That is the most basic of it. That's like the core of what it is. But a Parivartan Yoga can easily be influenced when other planets are sitting with one of the planets who's creating this yoga. And just to show you that principle, I'll just show you a chart right now. So as you see here, a Gemini ascendant chart where Mars is in the 4th house, Rahu is in the ascendant, Mars in the 4th house in Virgo, Ketu is in the 7th house in Sagittarius, Sun is in the 10th house in Pisces. And then you have Mercury, Moon, Venus in the 11th house in Aries, and Jupiter, Saturn in the 12th house in Taurus. This is your chart. So who's creating a Parivartan Yoga here? Mars and Mercury, right? Mars and Mercury are exchanging each other houses. So you, in a graph, you can see how Mars energy is making a link with Mercury and how Mercury's energy is making a link with Mars. So let's say if this person goes through the Mahadasha of Mars, and then they go through Antradasha of Mercury. You know what Mahadashas are, right? If you're new to this thing, just type in what are Mahadashas. These are like time periods in a person's life that we're always going through. You could be in a 7-year cycle of Mars right now. Then after that, you might be going into a 18-year period of Rahu, then 16-year period of Jupiter. And obviously you'll find that in my books, astrology, and my YouTube channel. But if you just know this basic, in this Mahantradasha of Mercury, a person gets into a romantic relationship. Mercury rules the ascendant and the 4th house. Mars rules the 11th and the 6th house. So how did this romantic relationship started when there should have been something to do with disputes in home or some fulfillment of desire related to the home happening. Because this is a good Parivartan Yoga, actually. Because it's not using the sign of Scorpio, it's using the sign of Aries, of Mars, the 11th house, Upachya house, house of hopes and wishes and desires, 4th house of land and home and mother. Perhaps this person may get a property in this Mahanantradasha. But why did the romantic relationship occur? Well, you gotta think like this. Imagine Mercury's beam is also receiving the beam of Venus. So Venus's beam, because Venus is with Mercury, Venus is also sending its beam to Mars. And then imagine Moon. Moon is also sending its beam to Mars through Mercury. It's like there's this funneling laser beams that go from one tube of Mercury towards Mars. So it's not just blindly Mars and Mercury looking at each other, no. Mars is also being looked at through Venus and Moon. Mars knows through his walkie-talkie, through his connection, that Venus and Moon are also present, so something will happen. So in this period, when you get a relationship, why relationship? Venus is the Karka, meaning significator of marriage, romance, relationship, women. And Venus actually rules the 5th house of romance for this person. At the same time, Moon rules the 2nd house of family, home, wealth. So wealth can not just come through real estate, but through the mother. Even though it's a house of the mother, the 4th house, 2nd house is of family. And shows there could be something related. A person may suddenly feel emotional during this time. They'll be like, why am I so emotional in this Mahanantradasha if they study and go back? Mercury is not emotional. Mars is definitely not emotional. But because light of Moon, the laser of Moon was funneling through the telepathic link of Mercury, that's how Mars was affected by Moon. This is how you study this. Why is it you may get married, and this is especially after my testing of people who got married in certain Mahanantradasha. And I'm just like wondering, why did this happen? This was like back in 2008 and 9, and that's when, I realized that, it's because the 7th Lord was becoming part of this Parivartan Yoga. So this planet's Antradasha, which was ruling the 7th house, also became part of it. But it was not more so ruling the 7th house. It's more to do with Karakas. It was the Karaka, like Venus. Venus is the significator of marriage, spouse. So that Parivartan Yoga can give marriage spouse. Jupiter creating, 2 planets creating Parivartan Yoga with each other, which has nothing to do with the 5th house or 9th house, not even 2nd house. But somehow this person gets pregnant or gives birth to a child in that particular Mahanantradasha. Why? Because Jupiter, the Karka, the significator of children, would probably be affecting one of these planets and creating a telepathic link through that Parivartan Yoga. Like, I'll show you another example. And this Parivartan Yoga concept is not just for major period of Mercury and sub-period of Mars or vice versa. No. Anytime Mars sub-period comes in, no matter what Mahadasha you're running, it could be Saturn Mahadasha and Mars Antradasha, there still could be influence of romantic relationships. Influence of marriage in Mars sub-period, because Mars through Parivartan Yoga is not only being aspected by Mercury, but because Moon and Venus are conjunct Mercury, they're looking at Mars. And Venus, the Karka, the significator of marriage, looks at Mars, says in sub-period of Mars, something related to relationship, marriage, having a girlfriend can happen. Coming across some female can happen. Wealth through female can happen because of all these little connections that are happening. So this is something you just also want to know, not just the major and sub period of Mars and Mercury. So in this chart, you see a Sagittarius ascendant. You have Jupiter, Moon, Mars in the 3rd house, in the sign of Aquarius. And then Saturn is in the 5th house in the sign of Aries. What is happening? Parivartan Yoga, exchange of signs. So Mars is affecting Saturn, Saturn is affecting Mars. They're both looking at each other. They have an aspect to each other. That's what this is. Simply an aspect. Aspect between 3rd and 5th Lord. Now, before we even get into those other scenarios that I'm talking about, you also have to understand a Parivartan Yoga has to be read in a way that whichever sign comes first through the house placement, that sign is first going to affect that point. Then the other planet, the second sign in chronological order is then going to affect the other sign. So sign of Aquarius comes first in Sagittarius for a Sagittarius ascendant. So 3rd Lord is in the 5th house, Saturn, and Saturn is debilitated. What it shows here first is that due to certain problem with either a sibling, problems with the hand may keep you away from your education. Perhaps your education was disturbed due to maybe you had pain in your hand. You had to take care of your younger siblings. Anything can happen. I can give you 20 different scenarios. Okay? But now you have to look and see, okay, now the second sign in chronological order for Sagittarius ascendant, the Aries sign rules the 5th house. 5th Lord is in the 3rd house. So now what happens? Your education got stopped, perhaps due to your younger sibling. You know, something, whatever, you had pain in your hand, arthritis, carpal tunnel, whatever. And you just could not type or write and you had to take time off for 2 years before you could finish your education. But then what happens is, because 5th Lord is in the 3rd house, shows a person actually gets technical skills off hands to finish their education or to do their work. And whatever work they do will be routine, repetitive with their hands. Because Saturn is looking at Mars, Mars are looking at Saturn. So you see how this Parivartan Yoga works of this chronological order. But now, as you see, the beam of Saturn and Mars are looking at each other. They're affecting each other. So in their Mahanantra Dasha, anytime Chara Dasha, Kal Chakra Dasha, Sri Lagna Kendra Dhari Dasha, anytime these two planets get activated, their beam they turned on the beam. Okay, we're active. We're going to do something related to the 3rd and 5th house. But now you have to understand results could vary of this Parivartan Yoga because Jupiter is also making a link with Saturn. Saturn knows Jupiter's there with Mars. He's not blind to it now because he can hear Jupiter in the same room, in the same house. But then you also see the beam of Moon being activated. It knows Moon is there too. So this Parivartan Yoga is also going to be affected by Jupiter and Moon. So Jupiter rules the 1st and 4th house. Moon rules the 8th house. This can show Mahayana Antradasha can give you sudden transformation, emotional transformation in your life because you perhaps had to quit your studies and not go to school. Suddenly makes you depressed or angry. Some people may not feel depressed or any kind of emotion in certain Mahayana Antradasha severely, but because Moon was involved in this Parivartan Yoga, Moon is bringing that. Perhaps you had to get a surgery for the hands because 8th house is surgeries. That could happen. Now, it doesn't mean if you have this, it's going to happen to you. I mean, and many things can happen. That's what people don't get it. Whenever I give these example, it's part of one of literally 200-300 different things that can happen to you. Especially seeing which nakshatra each planet is sitting in. That's what determines the actual outcome, which I cannot get into it now. It'll make it too complicated. And if you don't know what nakshatras are, please go watch those videos as well. What are nakshatras? And then your ascendant, fourth lord Jupiter isn't there. So it can show that yes, your physical body is being affected somehow. Or Jupiter here blesses this Parivartan Yoga. Jupiter is a very positive planet, rules two very positive houses. Jupiter may show that your education, you knew it was not going to make it, but somehow, some way you found that money, or your hands were healed and you were able to continue on your education, or you maybe had to take a 3-month break, 4-month break instead of either a 2-year break, or maybe not finishing your education at all. All of these things you have to study, and the conclusion of this will come from looking at the nakshatra and then your intuition going to work at it. Intuition is a big part of prediction, big part of astrology. Without it, it's like you're, looking at a matrix and you just can't figure out what it is. But astrology just tells you, oh, it's 2 + 2 × 3 × 5 equals this. So you can make that, the intuition gives you that calculative ability. Calculative ability is not in the actual mathematical side of astrology. No, what exactly is the final answer is that intuition. But anytime when you guys hear me, whether in childbirth, career, marriage consultation, where I'm talking about this Mahadasha or that Antradasha, and I'm saying this is what's going to happen, now you know why I'm saying this, because of the fact certain planets, certain Karaka might be affecting. Perhaps in Mars and Saturn Maha and Antradasha, you also got pregnant. Not because of the 5th house, where somebody would predict, oh no, you cannot have a child right now because you got debilitated Saturn in the 5th house. How's that going to work? Well, you don't understand. Jupiter, the great blesser, is also looking at the 5th house and the same Maha and Antradasha. This is why the person would have great chances of getting pregnant instead of not. And remember, this also works for regular mutual aspects too. It doesn't have to be Parivartan Yoga. This can work when you have Jupiter in the 4th house in Cancer. You may also have Venus in the 10th house in Capricorn. But also with Jupiter, you have Saturn and Mars sitting there. So whenever, let's say, Maha and Antradasha of Jupiter and Venus comes into play, it's not just these two planets that are going to give their effect, this mutual aspect. Their Maha and Antradasha, major and sub period of Jupiter and Venus, will also somehow be linked with Mars and Saturn. Mars and Saturn are throwing their effect to Jupiter towards Venus. So it's not just Parivartan Yoga. Even regular mutual receptors, mutual opposite to each other, can affect if there's a bunch of planets on one side and one planet on the other side. Okay? So guys, this was my analysis of understanding Parivartan Yoga. If you're new to my channel, subscribe below. And if you want to know where your Parivartan Yogas are, if you have any Parivartan Yogas, all your other planetary placements, my books, consultations, all that, check out the links right here. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow with our conjunction videos. Bye-bye.